Hey, what's up, guys? So today I came across this interesting article from DualShockers.com, and it states that Capcom promises Resident Evil Requiem will be more RE2 than RE4. And this really caught my eye because I'm always thinking about how Resident Evil 9's gameplay will be, and will it be closer to Resident Evil 4, like more action heavy, with the parrying and the kicking and whatnot, or more like Resident Evil 2, without really the melee. I mean, you had the counter attacks, with the flashbang or the knife in Resident Evil 2 Remake, but that was really about it. And yeah, Resident Evil 2 Remakes gameplay is obviously more slower paced, and you have to be more strategic in general in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And this has me thinking, what do I want as a Resident Evil fan from this new title? In in case I even will buy the game, because that's still like, as if you watch my previous video, I'm still like not sold on Resident Evil 9 so far. As long as there's no Leon, I will not buy it, and I stand by that, just to let you guys know. But anyway, I don't want to focus on that right now. It's more so, what do I want from what I would like to see from Resident Evil 9 in terms of gameplay. And yeah, because when I check my playtime on Steam, I actually have way more playtime in Resident Evil 4 Remake than I have in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I feel like if they stick more to Resident Evil 2 Remake, I feel like that will probably become stale more quickly, because I feel like that type of gameplay has its limits where replayability becomes an issue. Now, obviously, if you play on PC, there's like a trillion mods these days from Nexus mods where you can have randomizers and whatnot. And there have been some great randomizers by now for both games, actually, for RE2 Remake and RE4 Remake. So that keeps replayability uh, basically infinite, and that's really a cool thing. But in terms of the core, the vanilla gameplay, as I would say, how rich will be the gameplay, and what do I prefer? So I feel like if it's like a mix between R2 Remake and R4 Remake, I feel like I can live with that, as long as they don't um, cut back on the action too much, because at the end of the day, I want to see some action at least, which I feel like even Resident Evil 2 Remake had that, in spots. So I think it's necessary that they don't completely kill off the action in Resident Evil 9 Requiem. And let's see what the article says. In the same conversation, Nakashini also talked a bit about the balance between survival horror and action elements, and how Requiem will be heavily inspired by Resident Evil 2's approach, which is, not a bad thing, as long as they keep the action in there. Rather than those games, we'd rather forget RE5 and RE6. I don't know, because I actually did enjoy Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6 in terms of gameplay. I think those are really fun games. Now, obviously, the action is, you can definitely say it's way over the top. So if they scale it back to more, in between Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4, I think that's the best approach for sure in this case. And because otherwise, if it would be like Resident Evil 5 and 6, a lot of people would definitely rebel against that, because it would basically turn into Call of Duty or whatnot. So yeah, what else do they say? I think you can broadly classify Resident Evil titles on a scale of how much they are like Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 4. Exactly, because you see this comparison all the time. It's like, what do you prefer? Is it Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 4? It's always that discussion, basically. Resident Evil 7 was definitely on the R2 side. Yeah, that's for sure. I agree with that. as it returned to survival horror roots and was very acclaimed for that. You know, one thing about Resident Evil 7, I have to say, I wish, in hindsight, I really wish they would have offered first person and third person even back then. Now, I don't know if that was even possible at the time because that was, I mean, the game was probably in development like from 2014. I mean, it released in 2017, so I don't even know if that was a possibility, like from a technological point of view. I mean, I would like to think it was possible even back then, but I feel like if they offered that, even at that time, man, I feel like the game would have done so much better because for me, I always like to play Resident Evil in the third person perspective. That's just my thing. And I'm just happy that they are going with this route this time in Resident Evil 9 Requiem. Offering both perspectives. That's already like a huge green flag for me. And I wish they have done that with Resident Evil 7. Now, I don't think Resident Evil 7 is necessarily a bad game. It's just the first person view kind of is a downside for me, and I actually only played it once, and that was it. I feel like the replayability wasn't there either for Resident Evil 7, in my opinion. It was kind of okay. I finished the game. I'm done. No interest to play it again. So, if anything, Resident Evil games should always leave the players for wanting more. Wanting to play through the game like 5 times, 10 times, offer a lot of variety and whatnot. And I feel like Resident Evil 4 Remake really does that well, where you can play the game in so many different ways. And RE2 Remake, not so much. It's like I feel like in terms of gameplay variety, it's still kind of limited in compared to Resident Evil 4 Remake. So let's see. Resident Evil Village built on that and added more action and gunplay and brought it towards the RE4. So yeah, that's true. And I actually, now that I'm reading this, I feel like Resident Evil Village was more fun, definitely more fun to play than Resident Evil 7. I actually played Village. I think I have like 400 hours in that game. So I really had a good time with Village, and because it really reminded me more of Resident Evil 4's gameplay. Although I have to say, when they added the third person to Village, retroactively, it was more like, it didn't feel the same as the RE2 or RE3 remakes third person view. So let's see. But if you kept going in that direction, there's almost an inflation effect where you have to keep adding more and more action to outdo the previous title. And by doing that, you ultimately end up where Resident Evil 5 and 6 went. Yeah, that's true, and I feel like they definitely need to scale that back every once in a while. Not to go super ham on the action. Because if you really think about it, the last release was now Resident Evil 4 remake, which is, pretty high up there in action. So they really need to scale it back again. So just to keep the balance, not to go over the top in one way or the other. But at the same time, I feel like it would be a mistake if they really cut out like all of the action and just make it like almost like a stealth survival horror, pure survival horror and stealth game, which would be also a mistake in my opinion. They still need to keep the action in one way or the other. And although they are still great games, the general consensus is that they pushed Resident Evil so far in the action direction that it was no longer horror. Nakanishi says, yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think he's definitely right about that. He clarifies that I didn't want to have to do that in Resident Evil's ninth title, where I just tried to outdo the action in Village and ended up making something I didn't want to make. Yeah, that was a good decision. Firmly swinging the scale towards the Resident Evil 2 style was our intention, and it's almost an upgrade. Yeah, that's cool. I think that sounds promising when he says it's an upgrade to Resident Evil 2 style. And yeah, so far, this article, from what I'm gathering, is they are leaning more towards the Resident Evil 2 remake gameplay style, which I can agree with. But nevertheless, when we go back to my last video, and if Leon is in the game, which I still tend to believe he will be, there has to be some action. I mean, there's no way they can leave action just completely out with Leon having being in the game. So yeah, we still have to wait and see what Capcom is going to show us in the next few weeks and months, I guess. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about this real quick and what I expect from Resident Evil 9's gameplay. And yeah, that's it so far. Take care and see you next time.